Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder, and today we're going to begin talking about America's role escalating in the Vietnam War. After the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, where we left off, President Johnson begins to kick U.S. military efforts into high gear, but soon we find that it's not the war we were looking for. We're stuck in a deadly quagmire, and there's not going to be a quick victory. The war begins to weaken the economy, divide the American people, and erode the nation's and the nation's troops' morale. So the first main aspect of the war in early 1965 is Operation Rolling Thunder, which is a sustained bombing campaign against North Vietnam to show them American power and American might and that they don't want to mess with us. We want to persuade the North Vietnamese to stop supplying the Viet Cong in the South. We dropped 6 million tons of bombs. Not 6 million bombs, 6 million tons of bombs, which is more than 3 times the tonnage of bombs that all countries dropped in World War II. We began to commit more troops in 1965, about 180,000 total. These advisors turned into ground troops and soldiers, and they're led by General William Westmoreland. He is the head military guy in Vietnam. Secretary Robert McNamara is the Secretary of Defense, and he and Westmoreland kind of direct the Vietnam War. They feel that the U.S. needs to fight more in order to win this military operation. Newer weapons used in Vietnam were Agent Orange and napalm. Agent Orange is an herbicide which is used to kill plant life. The foliage in Vietnam is so thick that if you were walking through it, you would not be able to see somebody that was a couple feet in front of you. A Vietnamese soldier could be hiding right there. So this is used to kill the plant life so that it's easier to bring the enemy out. It also caused cancer and birth defects to those who came in contact, and 12 million gallons were dumped, and it was an ecological disaster as well for the environment, for the Vietnamese ecosystem. Napalm is filled in these large canisters, and they are dropped and they explode on impact and they catch fire. It's like, think of putting Vaseline on your skin and then setting it on fire and trying to get it off in time. It's very, very difficult to extinguish. It clings to clothes and skin. It's a nasty weapon. It would burn people to death because you can't wipe it off. And very, very nasty weapon that was used in Vietnam. The U.S. Marines arrive in early 1965 to defend the air base at Da Nang. A lot of their missions were just defensive at first, but some would go on search and destroy missions, which the goal was to root out and kill the Viet Cong guerrilla fighters. Also, helicopters were used a lot in Vietnam because it was a way to quickly transport soldiers in and out of locations that they couldn't get to on mountainsides and in rice paddies. In and out of remote locations. We're fighting the Viet Cong. And the Viet Cong, the group in the south that is fighting with the north, they travel light. They may only have a few handfuls of rice and a gun. They hide in these complex tunnel systems, which we'll go into later, during the day, and they attack at night when you can't really see that well. They would set booby traps to basically harm U.S. troops. It would be as simple as a hole in the ground with a sharpened stick sticking out of it, but that would impale you, impale your foot, impale some part of you, and prevent you from fighting. And they also set off explosives at American bases. Their leader in the north is Ho Chi Minh, and Ho has a very specific military doctrine that he ties to animals. His rules are never fight on your opponent's terms, and basically that the North Vietnamese Army's troops are like a tiger, and the United States is like an elephant. The tiger cannot stand still, or else the elephant will easily crush it, which the United States could have done. But if the troops keep moving and occasionally strike at the elephant and then disappear back into the jungle, the elephant will eventually bleed to death. And if you learn about the Vietnam War, that's pretty much what happened to us. We had limited results at first, and so Robert McNamara famously says we need to win the hearts and minds of South Vietnamese soldiers before we can accomplish the victory of the entire war. The U.S. bombers in Rolling Thunder do disrupt North Vietnamese industry and slow the supply movement to the Viet Cong, but the communists do not give up. They are adamant that they will take over the entire area, North and South Vietnam. Death count continues to escalate for Americans, and unfortunately the South Vietnamese government, even after Diem, becomes corrupt and does not enjoy any support outside of the large cities, because outside of the large cities, the U.S. troops, that's where they mainly are, and they are not wanted there. So we're not going to support the government that allows them to be there. Here you can see the cost escalating, and these are per year, so billions of dollars, $50 billion, then $80 billion, upwards of $90 billion by the end. And here you can see our troop deployment, 200,000 troops, 400,000. We get up to 550,000 in 1968 before we begin to de-escalate the war. And then you can see the number of fatalities. A high of 16,000, 17,000 troops were killed in 1968 alone. So the total cost of the war in 2012 money was $729 billion. Over 58,000 Americans are killed in this war. And one of the troubles is that we can't tell Viet Cong from civilians. The Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese both avoid engaging U.S. troops. They only engage when they know they're going to win. They change into black outfits to blend in with the night jungle, which provides perfect cover for them, and they would attack when U.S. troops were in small groups and then disappear, attack and disappear. They used guerrilla warfare. Americans are there. What is their stance? They believe in, a lot of them believe in the prevention of the spread of communism. Some of them are there fighting for humanitarian reasons to help South Vietnamese villagers avoid falling to communism. Some fight because everyone in their family fought in wars up until then, and so now they have to fight in a war to represent their country. Women even go. 10,000 women serve in Vietnam. Most serve as nurses. The morale starts to wear down, however, years into the war. The draftees, people that were drafted, and we'll talk about the draft next section, they are forced into fighting. They're being killed for a country that resents them for being there. The United States, or the South Vietnamese, don't want them there, and they're fighting and dying for South Vietnamese. The average age of a soldier in Vietnam was 22 years old, and 11.6 thousand of the 58,000 killed in action were less than 20 years old. Just lives that were wasted. We start to get low morale back home. Americans start to question the U.S. involvement as their friends and family are drafted to serve. Is this really vital to American interest? And it also affects LBJ's Great Society. It starts to create lots of inflation in the economy, and he has to cut back on his Great Society initiatives and raise taxes to pay for the war. When the quick victory in Vietnam does not come, anger begins to mount. And in Congress, basically there's two groups of people. Doves are people who broke with Johnson's war policy. They're the people who want peace. The dove is a symbol of peace. They question the war's morals and strategies. Basically, it's a group of pacifists, student radicals, liberal politicians, and civil rights leaders are all doves. The hawks are the very conservative politicians who believe in Johnson's war policy, and they believe the containment of communism is vital to winning the Cold War, and whatever costs are worth it. Very conservative politicians, they accept the rising troop levels, escalating costs, and the increased battlefield deaths. And the lead dove is Senator J. William Fulbright. And he is a senator. He's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He originally supports the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, but over time realizes that this is actually a civil war and not a communist takeover from Beijing or Moscow. So he starts to hold congressional hearings on the war and provide an important platform for critics to spread their views. And so we'll get into more of his congressional hearings in a little bit. That's all I have for today. Make sure you fill out your learning targets, and I will see you back here in class. Bye-bye.